Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Korean Help podcast. Korean Help is an organization dedicated to helping the Korean American community through our various programs from legal aid to our nonprofit assistance program. My name is Hannah, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator of Korean Help.
Hi, I'm Yunho. I'm the program coordinator for Korean Help.
I am Harold. I'm part of the network and navigating team of Korean Help.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm also part of the networking and navigating team for Korean Help.
And I'm JD, the advisor for Korean Help.
And together we are part of the Korean Help podcast. Here on the podcast, we spread awareness of the Korean community, not only in our home base, which is New York City, but on a global scale. And similarly to what we talked about last week, there has been a lot more breakthroughs in the Asian community in terms of the film industry. And Michelle, would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so on March 5th, Disney released a new Disney princess movie called Raya and the Last Dragon. And this is the first Southeast Asian Disney princess. And the cast is mostly Asian Americans. And the setting for the movie is a fictional realm called Kamandra, which is inspired by cultures across Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So there's a lot of visual details like the architecture, the landscape, food, weapons, costumes, and even colors inspired by these countries. But there's been a lot of criticism about having a fictional setting, which leaves less development to really emphasize the character and the Southeast Asian princess and its culture. And some say that it's created too much of an imaginary world because in the past there's movies like Aladdin where there are super stereotypical depictions and they made kind of like a foreign, more barbaric depiction. Um, so having these like movies in the past, do we think that this movie was a missed opportunity for cultural collaboration, similar to movies like Moana that gave a super realistic version of the Polynesian culture? So what do you guys think about this opportunity with the Raya and the Last Dragon?
I think there's actually a lot of representation in the movie. Like you mentioned, Michelle, there's been a lot of different tools and clothing and culture that is shown in the movie. And I don't see anything wrong with the whole fantasy aspect of it because literally the name it says The Last Dragon. So of course it has to be in a fantasy world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit nitpicky right there. And it does make me wonder, like, oh, if people do want it to be in a more realistic setting, let's say like an actual, pinpoint on the map of this world, where would it really even be set in? Because it's a mixture of cultures at the end of the day that was put into this movie, and it was able to shed light to a lot of different Asian cultures. And it does make me wonder if it was only set in one place, in one realistic geographic place, would it be able to have done all that in terms of spreading so much awareness in Asian cultures?
Yeah, it's like about dragons.
Yeah,
um
let them rock.
yeah, and I feel like all fantasy genre worlds they take like culture from places and kind of like mix it around. I feel like that's just like what people do when they like, I guess, try to make up like a fantasy world.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that they went for like Southeast Asian cultures. Like I think it, like if they did like a Korean culture, like they somehow like mixed it in. Like I think I would think it's like pretty cool.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
would want to see it. Yeah.
Representation is representation at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned Aladdin, and they were kind of, some people were using that as a comparison to the whole cultural like representation. But really, like, did Aladdin really have that much in terms of culture? Because it was a lot more exaggerated, really, than informative about like culture and Asian culture, Middle East culture. And I think, yeah, it's like, dang, like right now, this is a lot. This is a huge accomplishment to have an animation that represents Asian culture at the end of the day. I know I keep repeating that word, but it is a huge thing. You know, since growing up, like I'm sure like a lot of us didn't see um, Asians on TV a lot or in animations really. Like I can't really recall any Asian representation in animations growing up at all. And just being able to see that now, grown up more, is something that I think people shouldn't take for granted, and people shouldn't be like trying to like do like some kind of nitpicking work on it just because I just don't see the point of it, of complaining about it instead of just appreciating it for what it is right now.
I don't want to be too critical, but because things take time, right? And people learn, and but I do think on the flip side, when is Southeast Asia, represented in media? I think there's not a lot of opportunities, not a lot of instances, right? And so, in a way, I mean, just for me, right, my personal view is maybe it is a bit of a missed opportunity. But again, I don't want to be too critical either because, again, things
Mhm.
take time, right? But I will say that, because of the Vietnam War, the Vietnam is often depicted, right, in that war setting, but that's, so stereotypical and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and it would be good to see their culture and their history and their traditions too, right?
Yeah. They're like kids movies about like flying carpets and dragons. Like I think they should be colorful and like kooky and like imaginative. And like you said, like it's always depicted in like Vietnam, like war and stuff. Like I'd say it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, I agree. It does make it's like it doesn't have a political or like a very serious agenda behind it, and that's what I like about The Last Dragon. It's just there for entertainment whilst also showing the world that there's so much more on the other side of the map across from America, and just showing that like opening people's eyes to that is a first step. I think it's definitely getting a foot in the door, which is something that I think deserves an applause. Even though I do agree with JD though, like yes, there could have been more done. Um, Maybe they could have incorporated more name dropping or more historical context that could go back to the history, like a more accurate history of Asian countries. For example, like um, let's say if there was something to do with Vietnam in the movie, then like trying to go back and like erase the entire stereotype that comes with Vietnam and the Vietnam War. But I feel as if that's definitely something that can be implemented in the future, but I don't think it's something that like the movie should be hated for not having. Like, yeah, I think it's something that they can grow, and that's like the film industry as a whole can grow and learn and do more of. But I don't think that's a good reason to hate on the movie and say this is not a good movie just because they weren't being specific about cultures like that.
I don't hate the movie.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying you do. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying like Michelle mentioned that there are people that are heavily critiquing the movie, and it's just I don't see why it has to come to such a high level of criticism, honestly,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
On like Southeast Asian representation, also the cast is made up of mostly Asian Americans like Aquafina, Gemma Chan, Daniel Day Kim, and Sandra Oh. So is this really good representation of having a Southeast Asian princess? Or
Wait, I heard a whole bunch of Korean and Chinese names, and we're not Southeast Asian. Chinese and Koreans are Northeast Asian.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, like that's like the problem. Yeah.
I
Oh.
see. That is a good point. That so wait, let me make this clear. People are saying that it's a movie that should be focused more on the South Southeast Asian community. Like that's what people are saying. But then they're saying like, oh, then why did they not cast more Southeast Asian voice actors? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
That's
And
another side of the story.
it's because all of these East Asian actors, actresses have kind of like that influence already. So they're using them as voice actors instead of finding more Southeast Asian
Oh,
actors, actresses.
well,
Hmm.
that is interesting because then that adds like a monetary factor into it.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of like walking on eggshells with this topic since I don't know too much in terms of scouting voice actors and then like the whole advertising aspect and then the whole COVID aspect that was pushing off their deadline and like when they were releasing the movie. But yeah, I just can't speak on the part for Southeast Asian community because I'm not part of that community and I don't want to like say that I can accurately determine what they're feeling, if they are feeling represented or not. But I can definitely see where people are coming from when they're saying that they should have done more research and done more effort to having better voice actors that are like more closely related to the entire theme that is Southeast Asian culture. If that's right.
Yeah, regardless, we have to give a shout out to Aquafina, our very own Aquafina from Queens and from Flushing.
Yeah.
And who
Daniel Kim, there's a lot of, I mean, the entire voice cast was Asian. Yeah.
And who I think resembles a bit.
Wait, really?
I don't know. Yeah, but like, sorry, I wasn't clear. Is the movie setting like an imaginary place that kind of incorporates some Southeast Asian cultural elements, or is this like specifically set in Southeast Asia somewhere?
That's what I was thinking. Like it was inspired by Southeast Asian culture, but it's actually set in like a fantasy land. Yeah.
But I think because like they say she is a Southeast Asian Disney princess, so they made just like an imaginary land in Southeast Asia, I'm assuming.
You know how like in Big Hero 6 they kind of just put Tokyo and San Francisco together and made like a fantasy place? Is it kind of like that? Like
Yeah.
the way okay, I see.
It's like kind of like Black Panther. They like made Wakanda.
Right. Okay. Oh, that makes
okay.
visualize it for me.
Okay, because I was thinking like totally just like I don't know, like you know
Like
how like Game of
random
Thrones, it's like a totally like fictional place, but it's like kind of like based on like English stuff.
I was literally thinking like they just drew a random blob and was like, okay, this is their land, and then was like,
Yeah,
and then they just like put like culture into it, not that it was
yeah.
more based. Oh, that changes things. Okay, I see. Okay, then in that case, then yeah, like I still do think that they should be praised for doing their part in spreading awareness and like just having more exposure to the world in terms of like the Southeast Asian culture. But yeah, that is something fishy that they didn't cast more Southeast Asian voice actors. That's something that I am a little like why did they do that?
Yeah, like obviously there's a lot to be critical about for like how much an underrepresented community is like if I was part of the community, I probably want like a really accurate depiction, especially in such a big platform such as I think that like as an opening eye catcher, it's a good start for the community since like if you take like K-pop for example, like through like one medium, like people are starting to get immersed into like Korean culture and then like trying to learn more about it. So like in this sense for like this movie, I think like K-pop for Koreans for like yeah, for like the Southeast Asian community, like a good start.
Yeah. Yeah, it also brings us back to like current events right now where we are seeing a lot more use of social media and like use of, I want to say, like informational outlets in order to show the world what the Asian community has to go through, the good and the bad. And unfortunately, there's a lot more bad that's been addressed on the news. And I'd like to talk more about that, especially with us being in New York City. Andrew Yang is running for mayor, and he has a whole plan, a whole skeleton of a plan created in order to help combat anti-Asian crime. And I was wondering if or Harold, you guys can touch upon that more.
Yeah, so he recently outlined some of like his plan to combat anti-Asian violence in the city, and I feel like plan is like a kind of a generous word. I feel like he was just kind of like saying stuff about it because it's pretty hot right now.
It was like kind of like a publicity release thing. Like
I don't know, like
sees the problem, something like that.
Yeah, that's what it kind of felt like because yeah, first like his first step he said is funding the city's Asian hate crimes task force, like funding them properly because right now they're just made up of volunteers, and this would kind of force these hate crimes to be taken more seriously.
Which, by the way, is his third point, right? Just to take more seriously, right?
Yeah, and I feel like, okay, like funding them sounds like a concrete plan. And I feel like that was like the only like real step he kind of mentioned.
Like real tangible step?
Yeah. Yeah. And he vowed to reach out to communities that have like a negative relationship with the city officials and law enforcement and kind of encourage residents to report hate crimes. And that sounds all great and stuff, but I feel like we need like another set of steps for a plan for that.
Like more legislative movements. Something.
Yeah, like more concrete steps. It's just like vague.
Yeah, it's been crazy lately. I don't know if he was trying to be like vague on purpose, you know what I mean? Like if he was trying not to like step on anybody's shoes by like just showing that he supports the whole movement against anti-Asian crime, especially since he is Asian himself. But yeah, like it is a little bit like, I don't know how to say, like, and there's a Korean word, ashua, like very like a깝ta kind of. How do you say it in English? Like it's very like, dang, like I wish there was more, right?
Yeah.
Something like you know what I mean? Like I don't know how to specifically translate that into English, but you know that feeling where it's like, dang, like I wish they continued and like elaborated more. And I think that with Andrew Yang's plan, like I wish he definitely wasn't as like careful with his wording, or if he was even, or on the flip side, like more careful with details and like actually had more, like you said, concrete plans available, since it's happening now, so might as well like create plans for now.
Are we saying this is a sequel to Bodega Gate? I'm kidding. I just like saying Bodega Gate.
Bodega, young. But I know that we mentioned this before too, especially when like it really started popping off in social media, where like, a lot of people realized that we need to do our part as fellow Americans, fellow Asians, fellow humans, to spread awareness and like show people that this is a problem that the Asian community is facing and has been facing for many years now, and just like bringing us back and defrosting it all so that people aren't like so desensitized to the entire topic of anti-Asian crime and like racism towards Asians. But it's crazy because yes, it's great to have so much social media posts on these so that like we can be informed, but it does make me sad like seeing such an increase in them as well, and so close to home. It's just like, what's going on? And yeah, like for myself, it would have been great to see like more action taken on like the whole police system. Like personally, it would be great to see like something more, something that's like the police system can be reformed for, to help the Asian community and like to help slow down or like just annihilate the entire rate of this anti-Asian crime. Because it's like it's happening and these people are not getting caught. Like not all of them are getting caught, and trials can be slow, and it's definitely frustrating as people that like we're watching it happening, but like imagine what the families are going through that are actually the people that actually were directly involved in these crimes. I just it's just crazy. You can't know what that is until we are in their shoes. And I can't imagine how frustrated they must be by all of this happening right now, you know?
Yeah, and like at Korean Help, we do a lot to kind of help connect the Korean community with like officials, like Queensborough president, and link them with organizations and stuff like that. But as we all know, like the establishment is very slow to form deep relationships with the community. And one of his concerns was connecting the community, like communities that are hesitant to report hate crimes. So how do you guys think that we can get them to engage on a deeper level?
For the government? Hello.
Yeah, I guess like law enforcement, and like the people. I feel like the police can, like better get really connected with like something like a KCS or something, and kind of work together to put out like a infographic or something for Korean or Asian seniors.
Yeah,
And just
and
like,
just to follow up on an earlier podcast, right? We said that we might talk to the borough president, the Queensborough president's office, and in fact, they had already been planning a press conference, and they held it the following week on Monday morning. It was not without what do you call it? I mean, it could have been better. It could have been more inclusive of kind of like first generation ethnic organizations like Korean and Chinese. But I mean, again, I don't want to be too critical. I really welcome the fact that they did that. I think they were one of the first to do it, right? Like I said, it takes time, right? It takes time for everybody to, and to answer your question, I think the only way is, just for people to keep relating to each other, keep, getting to know each other, keep talking, deepen the relationships. Yeah.
yeah, I just feel like this is like very, sorry,
Are you good?
this urgent, I guess, and it's like a matter of safety, especially for like elderly people who like don't really know that much English and like don't really know where to like contact people for that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's I have definitely seen though on social media that there are more infographics like Michelle, I mean, like mentioned. There's a lot more like visuals to really help the community and like people come together and see the struggle as a whole and understand the gravity of it all in order to go forward and actually combat it and actually fight against it. But one thing that has been troubling, like there has been a huge catalyst with these anti-Asian crimes. Like in New York City, because of that, there has been a rise and the anti-Asian violence, and then it actually adds even more strain on New York City restaurants that are owned by Asian households, owned by Asian families. And Harold, I was wondering if you could elaborate more on that for us.
Yeah, so as we all know, restaurants have already taken a hit by COVID,
Yep.
but recently due to the Asian hate crimes and like this increasing trend of racism, the Asian restaurants are now indirectly being avoided and also taking worse hits as the employees are getting targeted. So even like Xi'an's famous foods, they had to close earlier than usual because they realized that two of their employees were punched in the face for walking near the subway like at late in the night. So yeah, there's like this increase of fear of like these family-owned restaurants that are Asian, so they're like scared to operate at their like normal times. And there's also been like over 500 reports of crimes, like that's like an exponential number compared to in like last year. So in response to these types of like close downs and like crimes, there's like politically and legislatively there's not really being much done, like to be frank. Like Andrew Yang, like the representator of like basically Asian Americans, like went to a rally against the crimes of the AA Federation.
Mhm.
Like again, like
More than
there's
that.
just been like a lot of like increased awareness, but there's not really policies going around. New York NYPD created a task force last year to combat this, but obviously it's like really not enough at the moment. One thing that it has been going on was the Enough is Enough movement by Eric. Um, he basically started this movement to like start raising money and also spread awareness. And lately they've been raising like thousands of dollars to support like Chinatown and like places in need. So yeah, given the increase in these crimes and like how the community's been indirectly um affected, like what do you think um like how what do you think can be done, and like what kind of emotional toll do you guys believe continue to have on the community?
Well,
Um,
like you said, Harold, I think, and I mentioned it before too, there needs to be a lot more action, not only taken by the citizens, but also by the government and the police system, since they are the ones that are protecting us as citizens, you know, and but obviously they are not doing enough. I'm not trying to like put all the blame on them at the end of the day, but it is their duty to protect us, and it just seems as if not enough is being done, or it's being done at a slow rate. And so many people are being affected now. Like you mentioned, Harold, did you say 50 crimes reported?
500, 500
500.
mm,
Okay. Amazing.
in the
500. That's
tri-state area.
crazy.
Yeah.
I like we can't fathom how many 500 cases is, and it's a ripple effect. So it's not just the people that are in those cases that are affected, but so much more. And um yeah, like I just want to see more done, you know, like more, like for example, maybe more like police presence in the areas that are more heavily affected. I'm noticing that there's a lot more crimes committed in subway stations. I know it's definitely hard to put more people in the subway station, um, but I think that one thing that really needs to be implemented and like changed is their camera surveillance system, because their camera surveillance system in the subway has not been updated for so long, to the point where like everything is blurry on those things. Like you can barely detect people on them, you know? And it's just like, how do you think people can catch these people when you can't even identify them in the first place, you know?
And
And
I would say, as a dad, right, whose son had to go to the city on a regular basis, now I'm just very freaked out, right, very concerned, right.
exactly.
And the thing about these attacks is, there seems to be a pattern, right? They're like sneak attacks from behind, like pushing elderly or just running up to you suddenly, right? And so, I mean, and not just my son, right? I mean, I would imagine people would be very just nervous, very cautious, right? You don't know when somebody's going to jump out and attack you, right? So,
Yeah, like usually I go to the city, so recently my dad told me like to be careful, and just like hearing that, since I've never really had an adult say that to me before, it's kind of like eye-opening, and yeah, it was really scary. But I think there should be a bigger emphasis on connecting with, again, the elderly or like first generations, because we have kind of like the resources, we have social media, we see posts, but they're like more disconnected than we are and really don't know where to go, I guess, when they experience this or when they witness this. So, yeah, I think that should be emphasized more.
I think it's also like important to recognize like these are only temporary solutions. Closing down early, like first, that's probably gonna lower their pay, especially in like need like what in times like this where they probably need every cent they can get, and also that doesn't guarantee their safety necessarily. So yeah, I think there needs to be like a lot of action done like politically and legislatively.
yeah, Harold, I saw the article too. It said they're closing at 8:30, like Xi'an's Famous Foods. 8:30 for a restaurant. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
right? That's so, so Hannah, before we wrapped up, I did want to share some information, right? Because, in an earlier podcast when we are talking about, the hotline and stuff like that. So, the Queens District Attorney, Belinda Katz, she said publicly that there's a hotline, but when I logged on to the site, it was harder to find, right? So they do have a hate crimes bureau number, 718-286-7010. Again, the hate crimes bureau for the Queens District Attorney is 718-286-7010. But I don't know if that's the hotline or not, right? And then separately, it says that there's a 24-hour hotline, but it doesn't say that that's for hate crime specifically, right? But in any case, that 24-hour hotline number is 718-286-6580, 718-286-6580. And also, there's so the City Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, they say just call 911 if there's an incident, but also there is a website, nyc.gov/stop Asian hate. And again, that's nyc.gov/stop Asian hate and call 911.
Another number that you can call in order to, um, you know, get in contact with the New York City Commission on Human Rights office directly in order to report a anti-Asian crime, whether that's facing harassment or discrimination in the household or at work or in any public space. You can also call 212-416-0197. Again, that's 212-416-0197. They should have language support if you need any interpretation services. So definitely this is good not only for those that have English as their first language, but also, for people that don't. For example, most of the seniors and most of the, first generation immigrants or parents of those that are first generation immigrants. Yeah, and with that, I like to wrap up this Korean Help podcast. Thank you everybody for listening, and always remember that your voice is powerful, and make sure you're heard by being active in your community. If you want to do that by being more part of Korean Help and you want to learn more about our initiative and efforts, take a look at our website, koreanhelp.org. lowercase, no spaces, koreanhealth.org. And don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you next time next week.